All right, here we go. Back at it again. Decomposing live episode. Oh, number 6. Very exciting stuff. We've got ourselves a very nice Voodoo Ranger Imperial IPA for drinking tonight. I got to get everything set up and situated. Coming in here a day late to the stream, but that's all right. It's going to be business as usual here in a couple seconds. So today we're going to be talking about creating locations and ways to get there in role-playing games. This is kind of a huge thing a little bit because a lot of the time, right, if you're not on an adventure, if you're not in the dungeon, then where are you, right? You're probably in town somewhere. That's kind of the other thing. Or you're en route to the dungeon, right? But that whole other section of the game where you're between adventures or you're in the middle of one and you're going back to resupply takes place somewhere. Usually in like a village or a city or who knows what. But just as the process of dungeon creation has evolved in gaming, tabletop RPGs and stuff, so has the town. The town has evolved. Things that we do whenever we're in the town change up. And it's part of the game that I think people are starting to talk about more. It's definitely had some more focus in the last couple books and supplements, right? I'm particularly thinking of Xanathar's Guide to Everything. They included this whole nice big section about downtime. For some people, I would actually say a pretty significant number of D&D, especially players, that if you ask them, what's your like favorite moment in the game, there's a very good chance that they're going to say something that has nothing to do with an adventure and just something that happened in downtime, right? Some really memorable moment about characters in the tavern or a funny interaction with an NPC or that time that the party almost came to blows and they started fighting each other. There's a really good chance that that's what they bring up. It has a lot less to do with the dungeon. So if we're going to have these downtime, what I like to call downtime, and people are calling downtime activities, we want to take a look at them and try to make them as awesome as we possibly can. Just another enjoyable part of the game. So let's maybe start with that. Let's see if we can come up with our village, our hypothetical village that we can be talking about. Who's all in the chat today? Who's hanging out? Say hey if you're in here. Who do we got? We'll get a canvas going. Oh man, okay. So this thing looks a little bit sloppy. This is another thing I want to talk to you guys about. Something I was just thinking about on the way home. Yeah, Wings Above is in here, holding it down for everybody. So I got this thing right now. It looks kind of like a crappy castle wall. But what I'm going to do with this, right? So this is going to become our village. Okay. So we want to make sure that we have a couple buildings, right? We want to think of our the staples of the town, right? The pillars of the community, if you will. And the businesses or buildings or kind of like main gathering areas that each community is going to have. I got 4 here, just because that's how many I kind of fit on the canvas in my first try. But let's start off. And I mean, the very first one, the one thing that kind of always, this is like your default location for the party a lot of the time. If you're just starting the game, the party's probably going to meet in the tavern, right? So let's get a little tavern going. Can kind of just going real fast. But with this kind of setup that we're doing here, this could be something that you add into your game, and you don't really need any real art skills to do what we're going to do with this, and it can be fun and add a little bit to your game as far as maps go. Or if you're just trying to, oh yeah, Dom's in here, very nice. As far as maps go, right, maps can add a lot to your game, and that's kind of something else that I wanted to talk about too, is just different uses of maps. So here we're going to see another kind of mapping, right? This kind of sideways view map. I imagine like side-scrolling RPGs, like the second Zelda game, like Link's Awakening. A lot of people hate it, but it did have this kind of what I think is a pretty neat like side-scroller sort of look to it, and I do enjoy that, right? So here we do like a little, you know, you don't have to be very good at art, but this all is like kind of getting the point across to some degree, at least I hope. You know, even if you just like throw out a piece of drawing paper, a piece of you know, printer paper out on the table, and you start going to town drawing like this kind of sideways view. Got the little shingle here at the side. It's just gonna say right bar. But the staple of the community, number 1, is gonna be the tavern, right? So this can be our tavern right here. Going sideways. Just make it a little bit more defined. Put some windows up there. And then, right, I have some space. I leave myself some space, so then underneath I can start writing some information here, right? Welcome everybody to the chat as you guys are getting in here. Thanks for coming to the stream. If you haven't opened up your beer already, please make sure do that. You're gonna need it for this. Yeah, this one I'm doing here, this is what I'm gonna probably be doing with a lot of my maps from now on. At least I want to. For any time that I have time to draw a map, I'm maybe gonna do it this way. And then under this though, right, so I have my tavern here. That's kind of like building number 1. This is letting the players know that this is some kind of option, a place for them to be where stuff might happen, right? It's a zone for a scene to take place, right? And then I can start to list some information right underneath this, you know, so that we got like innkeeper. Who's the innkeeper going to be for this place in this mystical kind of imaginary town? We don't know anything about this town yet. We're making it up as we go. Sometimes a whole town could be built around one character or one event that you want to have happen or take place, somebody really memorable. Over time, as you DM, you'll have like a whole backlog of stock characters that you break out on certain occasions, or you'll just take people's characters that you really enjoyed, and they'll sort of become NPCs in your world. I know I kind of do that a lot. Just steal characters from other players in the past, and put them in your game. That's also what a lot of the original Dungeon Masters did. Gary and all those people, right? They ran through the module. They made the module. They ran it with their friends, and then whenever they wrote the module, their characters became the NPCs that inhabited the town. So there's stories to go along about them. I think we talked about that a little bit with one character that is in the lands below, Judas Wolfsbane. He's the sheriff, and he was played by a player. And now that we're kind of done with that part of the game, now, as far as I'm concerned, anytime anybody in any of my games ever goes to that town, you know, they're always going to deal with Sheriff Judas Wolfsbane. He's just there now, right? He lives in the world. Let's think about our little village here. So I'm just starting off, you know, this is maybe a place where, is this a beginning adventure? It's probably like the beginning of the adventure, right? So we can have this innkeeper. Let's see if we can come up with something that's not just like a dwarf or like a dirty kind of human, right? This innkeeper is a like failed. He's a failed wizard, right? I just coming up with something different. He's a failed wizard, dropped out of the Mage Academy. Oh man, I'm just gonna type because my writing is just horrendous sometimes. Can't even look at my own writing. So let's write some information about this guy, right? He's a failed wizard. I'll make that bigger. Maybe only knows like a few cantrips at best, nothing that deals damage. And his name is going to be, man, Jeremy. There's not enough wizards named Jeremy, right? Failed wizard Jeremy is the innkeeper. And, you know, innkeepers always got something going on. They're kind of like the hub. They hear about everybody's coming and going. They usually know about the surrounding area. They hear all the tales from other adventurers, so on and so forth. So you're not really going to have much of a town unless you have some kind of central gathering area, right? And that kind of brings me to the overall kind of plot of or point of these towns. Like, what do we get out of towns? Why are there towns in Dungeons and Dragons? Why is there not just the dungeon? Why do we need something that is beyond that? And the reason is because adventurers need a place to spend their gold, right? I mean, that's probably a big part of what it comes down to is you spend all this time treasure hunting and you want to have something to do with your treasure once you have acquired it. So you got to go to town and you spend it, you resupply, you get your hit points back, you rest up, and you get more supplies before you go off on the next part of the adventure. That's kind of how this works. It gives you that valuable downtime. It's sort of like what we talked about before with pacing. If it's just action, action, action all the time, and you're always in the dungeon, it's that pace can just kind of mess with people. You'll get tired of it eventually. You need those low points. You need to have those low points where everybody's just chill and nobody's supposed to be doing anything in particular, and you can just act as your character as they would be hanging out, right? So in that regard, that's what the town provides us with. It's that place that we go to when we're not trying to kill monsters. It's where we go to spend our gold after we've killed all the enemies, right? And another thing is sometimes that's where we get other adventure hooks. We go from one place and then you go into the dungeon, you rid the moat house, right? I'm thinking of Village of Hamlet here. You rid the moat house of the bandits and you come back and then you need to hear about the next part of the adventure. How are we going to get deeper embroiled into some hijinks here? Well, people in the village are going to have those hooks for you. So this is one staple building that anytime you're designing a village, you got to think about your tavern, right? Write that on the side. Now let's bring up another building that we should probably have. Another building that we want to think about where NPCs are probably at is going to be like the church, right? Do another big thing here. Do like a sun. This is like a Palomedian church. Get those sun gods, right? Big doors. Just playing it fast and loose here with everything. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? And even if you're just doing this, in the middle of a session, you just need to improvise a town. Like I said, you could just sort of whip out a piece of paper and do this kind of little design on it. Make these little buildings. Do some big windows. There we go. Right. And this is, we need a bell tower for sure. So we can do like a little bell tower here on the side. There we go. I approve. That's all right. That's plenty for now. Church. The church needs somebody there because chances are this is where they might want to go for healing. You could always improvise and come up with a different kind of building. It doesn't always have to be the church. Maybe you don't want to involve any kind of religion or things like that in your game. Maybe healing magic isn't like doesn't exist, right? Maybe this is taken place by the apothecary, but you want to think about where the players are going to go if they need healed, right? So church, apothecary, those are two options for you right there. And we want to come up with our NPC who we're going to be interacting with, who's going to provide us with the healing, maybe drop some kind of hook on us. And in this case, let's do thinking for people who might not be aware, the Palomedians is kind of like one of the prevailing religions in the campaign world of Gaios, right? Which is the land, both the lands above and the lands below feature the Palomedians, and they kind of worship the sun, right? When the world was destroyed in the Great Shattering, the great races of the world were pulled up into the sun to be protected. And when the world was righted, made livable again, they were dropped off back onto Earth. And, they pretty much just feel that they need to live a life of righteousness in order to get back their place in the sun. Nothing too fancy, but easy to come up with, easy to think about. It's got very familiar kind of values and things like that. So, it's kind of like believable for the game world. Sometimes for D&D, at least, if you're playing it out of the book, I'm not always into this kind of huge sprawling big polytheism that is like the pantheon in like Forgotten Realms. I'm not saying that uh, just like having it be like it's like weird, right? Because all those things are just kind of like all in the same place, and it's strange. It can be a little bit strange to me. I don't know. All right. So the church got to have somebody here who's going to heal us. And in this case, maybe this is like an old adventurer, retired adventurer. And her name is going to be Hale. And nice. Your name's just Hale for right now. We'll come up with something more later. Let's do another building. So what's another staple building for us to have in our town, right? We got to have our innkeeper. We got to have our inn. We got to have our church, our place of healing. That brings us to staple number 4. Something that everybody's going to want, right? You need some kind of shop. So I'm going to do it the shop. Go like this, put another roof on it. Hey, and their partner well met. I love it. That's really good. So the shop fills this very important role that we're all gonna that all the party needs, right? This is where everybody's gonna go to buy new weapons, or this is where they want to go to buy like new weapons and stuff. All depends how cool you want to get with your shopkeeper here. You know, like a lot of the times, I prefer like you have to make a choice as the dungeon master. Um, do how much new equipment do you want your players to be able to just get by buying it versus being found in the dungeon itself, right? Like, I don't like the idea that magic items are just out there for people to throw an amount of coin on. You know, I like magic items to be found or earned or recovered, uh, crafted. I like that a lot. It's a little bit less interesting to me whenever you can just go and buy something magical. Now there can be some stuff that's like really expensive, like full plate, for example, is quite pricey, especially in 5th edition. So maybe they have like that sort of mundane thing, that full plate. Full plate is probably like a rare thing, and historically, I believe had to be made custom, right? Had to be custom fitted for you. So you need to find like a fairly high end blacksmith who is familiar with making such kind of wares, making armor like that. Maybe this guy can do it. Maybe, maybe this shopkeeper is in fact capable of crafting ancient weapons, forging magic. So it's really important that you're on his good side, right? But maybe he'll only do it if you're a believer of the old dwarven religion, right? Maybe he'll only do it for fellow dwarves or something. I don't know why all my blacksmiths end up being dwarves. I know exactly why all my blacksmiths end up being dwarves. It's because whenever I was 12 years old and I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, my buddy Matt was the only other person in my group of friends who would ever like be the dungeon master, and he just made this one dwarf one day, and I think I probably talked about him before, but his whole thing was like crafting stuff out of stone, right, and just making everything out of like granite, and would make fun of you if you got something that wasn't an axe or like a club or something that was just like some kind of brutal weapon. And he didn't make things like daggers. He would just give you like a light mace, or like he wouldn't give you something like a spear or like arrows. He'd give you like just rocks to throw, um, hand axes. And because of that, I've just kept that character, right? I've had that NPC that my buddy Matt ran, like probably almost 20 years ago at this point. And I've just been running him ever since, just because I think he's hilarious and he still gets a laugh, and that's like pretty entertaining. He's kind of a hit a lot of the time. Funny, funny dwarf who makes everything out of stone, right? But um, yeah, shopkeeper. Let's come up with somebody new. Who else can be a blacksmith? Who has an interesting smithing story? Maybe we've got right. This shop is maybe run by like a whole family of people, right? Have you ever seen? If you guys have seen like there's like a video. I don't think it's in smithing. They do it in smithing too. I know I've seen it in like a katana making video because of course I've seen that. Um, but I think I've seen it in like construction where everybody's like swinging these hammers and they all kind of like are swinging them like perfectly timed so that right whenever one person's hammer hits, the next person's hammer hits, and it goes like right down the line, and they're all like very close together as they like pound out the steel. And I think that's really cool. Um, so this could be like a family, right? This like blacksmith family. These are going to be elves, right? They're elves because they're going to be long lived. Elven family of like swordsmiths, right? So it's been just like, in the family's history, crafting these elven blades for generations. And the whole family works on any individual weapon to make it of like the highest possible quality or something like that. Boom, do that. Wait a second here. Hopefully I'm caught back up. Wasn't expecting that to just suddenly happen. I just got completely disconnected from the internet for like no reason, which is really strange because I'm plugged directly in. So I have no idea how that happened. But whatever. So the final building that we need is we need like the office, right? We need the place like the jail. It could be a lot of different things, right? But it's like the building of officials, the town hall, the barracks, right? Maybe it's a fort, right? If it's a big enough village and there's like a fort there, so it'd be like the fort. We'll do some pillars in the front of this guy because that's usually what you see in the front of like a courthouse, right? Just some. Oops. Oh, no, I don't like it. There we go. So we'll do like some pillar looking guys here in the front. Oh, I hate it. The internet got disconnected and now I can't even draw lines. Uh, bang, bang. Big roof. Okay, so this will be like our courthouse, right? Um, it's where the mayor lives, right? It's where government happens. This is sort of where how the town gets run, right? Mayor. And I'm going to say if you're going to have a village, you should probably have at least these four locations, right? I think that if you're not going to have four locations, then either you're just passing through this village really quickly and it's not going to be that important of a place, or just like don't have it. Don't have a village. You maybe just don't need it unless you're doing some very specific style of play where you don't participate in downtime stuff, right? But part of downtime too is giving your players the option to do different things, right? So if they don't have a handful of options, then what are they going to do? They kind of have to go somewhere else that's not the dungeon, right? Maybe they're just hanging out outside, and you can work with something with that. Um, but if you're going to have a village, at least have a couple different places for them to go. The mayor. Oh, jeez. Oh, man. Dang. Let's try that again. The mayor of this town is named, what's a funny name? I just heard a funny name the other day. It's the name of Rockbiter from Neverending Story. In the book, he has a completely ridiculous name. It's like Pjorn Krizask or something like that. It's really hard to say. It's a super crazy name, though. It's not just Rockbiter like it is in the movie. But Rockbiter is a pretty solid name. Um, we're gonna go. Oh man, let's just do Mayor. Let's do John, but we're gonna spell it like that. Gian. Mayor John. Tedworth. Yeah, John Tedworth. And his interesting thing, right? Let's just give him something kind of fun about him. He's been turned into an owl, right? And everybody's still just like cool with it, right? Maybe he can still like speak and stuff, and they're like, yeah, that's John, and he's fine. He's just an owl, whatever. He'll get over it. He'll get better. Um, and then that could be like a side quest sort of thing, right? So we have our four staple buildings. That's really what this comes down to. We have four places for players to go whenever they want to come into the village. And they have some things that are interesting and going on here, right? They've got a place to rest and just kind of like talk and get ruckus and um, have silly stuff happens, right? I'm sure that there's a number of groups out there playing D&D. If you ask the players one of their favorite moments, they're going to tell you about something that happened in the tavern one time, right? Definitely comes up quite a bit. A lot of ridiculous stuff goes down in the tavern. You want to have the church, right? Which is or the healer, right? The place where the players can go and get healed. Maybe somebody gets cursed. Maybe somebody gets something that's not easily fixable, and it's outside of the party's means to fix it on their own. So you got to have a place where healing can take place. Next, we want to have the shop, right? Because we got to have places. Wait, oh, hopefully this is working. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Maybe you can't hear me. I don't know. I just got another notification. It wouldn't be a night of decompositions if there wasn't technical difficulties, right? You want to have the shop, right? You have to have a place where the players can go and spend their money. And then we want to have the courthouse because we just want to know that the town is like kind of believable, right? Like someone is kind of running the place, or there is some type of unifying government sort of thing that binds these people together, whether it's some kind of town council or maybe it's all just unions or something. Maybe this is a tribe, and maybe who knows? Anything that you can come up with, right? But it's kind of like what seals the deal and makes this all come together is that somebody's kind of calling the shots, or there is something that coordinates things with other places and keeps the people together. And that I think classically, um, I know a lot of the times it's usually like the mayor. I know, like, at least whenever I've run it in the past, it's usually like the mayor who has some kind of mission for the players, right? Oh man, I don't know what's happening. I hope I'm still in here. Hope I'm still streaming, guys. Okay. But you know, the mayor, there'd be the mayor that would give people the mission, right? It's like the town's in trouble, and you go and talk to the mayor, and then the mayor's like, hey, there's a bunch of goblins riding on wolves that keep attacking the city, or hey, so and so's daughter's been kidnapped, or you know, things like that. Um, you know, the mayor's going to seek the adventurers, and you know, has the wealth, and is like the organizer of the town, so can call upon adventurers um, to go out and do things, right? And what we can do with this map then, so this is kind of the next little fun part here. We can put more tidbits underneath, right? Maybe you put some more specifics about Jeremy underneath the tavern. You put some more things about, like, some little bits of information as they get found out about Mayor John Tedworth's owl condition. You can write these in underneath the bottom, and then, you know, use another layer here, maybe. Then you have this laid out in front of you, or in Roll20 or something, right? You can do this really well in Roll20 as well. And you know, everybody, whenever you're doing downtime and everybody's back in the village, you can have them place. Oh man, I don't like that. That's not what we want. You can place like their player token on the tavern, right? If someone's on the tavern, we know that the turquoise player is in the tavern. And then we know that the violet player is going to go to the church, right? And then everybody, you can go through, and then everybody can have their own sort of like individual scene, or if two people want to have a scene together, you know, they can both be in the same place, and it keeps the plot going, because you don't want to be that player who tries to jump in on everybody's scene. That kind of like frustrates me a little bit, is like, you know, someone will be like, I'm going to go to the tavern and I'm going to get drunk, right? And that's totally fine and cool, classic D&D sort of thing. You always go to the tavern and get drunk. But then, you know, it's the next player, they're up, you know, the guy's been talking about drinking at the tavern for a little bit. It's time to move on. And there's a person who's like, oh, I'm going to go to the shop and do this thing. And then the person who's just drinking at the tavern is like, yeah, man, I'm at the shop too. And then, like, you're like, okay, sure, whatever. And then, like, another person's like, I'm going to the mayor. And then that guy who's supposed to just be drinking at the tavern is now also at the mayor's office, right? Just kind of like piggybacks along onto three scenes. And that's fine sometimes, like when maybe there's something being discussed that the whole party needs to be like involved in. But at the same time, everybody needs their moment in the spotlight to just kind of talk about what they're going to do in their downtime, right? And that would be some of my DMing advice to other DMs out there running downtime, especially if you've never if you've never thought about like having a codified downtime, you know, keep everybody in turns. Like, pick a player. I'm not saying it has to be super strict, you know. You kind of look at the clock or something, and then you're like, okay, we'll give this guy about 5 minutes or so. You don't say that, you know, you just kind of keep an eye on the time. And, you know, you ask them about what they're going to do in the tavern, if they're trying to just decompress because maybe they're very stressed out from the last adventure, or, you know, maybe they're looking to tail somebody who's been really shady going about in the town, and you kind of just have that scene with them. And maybe there are like 2 or 3 players all in the same scene, and that's totally fine, and their downtime kind of coincides with each other, and that's totally cool. It works out. But then, like, you know, give that other character who's going to the church, give them their time, right? They've got to have their moment where they're talking to the retired adventurer Hale, and Hale's going to like give them a warning about, you know, delving into dungeons or something, and suggest that, you know, maybe they you know, become a member of the cloth or something like that. Who knows? And it's kind of like an interesting scene. And for that character, you don't necessarily need everybody jumping in there and trying to piggyback off of that, right? Suddenly it's like, oh man, well, I want to become you know, you have the dude who was in the tavern, and they come in there like, I want to be a member of the cloth, and they, like, you know, kind of start treading on this other person's moment there, you know. And then we've talked about this before too with the shop, right? The shop, I got to take a big drink before we talk about the shop. if it's the first time that the players, if you have like, some people use like voices and acting more than others in their game, right? So if you have like a really memorable NPC that the players, are meeting for the first time, then yeah, you should probably role play out that time where they go into the store and they meet the dwarven smith who makes everything out of stone, because that's funny. It's going to be a good time, right? Or if there's like a wisecracking innkeeper or the mayor who's been turned into an owl. If it's their first time meeting that person, you should go and like role play out that scene and really talk about it. But if they've already been there like 5 times, you can kind of shorten it up. Just get the gist of things, especially in the shop. Like, there's no need to just role play out like, and then I'm gonna buy a backpack, and then I'm gonna buy a bedroll, and then I'm gonna buy this thing, and I'm gonna try to haggle with them on this, but then try and it's just very very time consuming, and unless you really enjoy that sort of thing, do role play out the important information that the shopkeeper has, right? Role play out the important things that the mayor has to say. But if it's just like, the player needs to stop by to pick up some arrows or something, that doesn't need to turn into like 15-minute role play between you and the shopkeeper there. That's going to just slow things down for everybody, and maybe make that really memorable moment that might happen in the tavern where like the big bar fight breaks out or something. That's just kind of slowing that sort of thing down from happening. Um, yeah, so if you've never done it, try this. I think I'm going to try to organize some towns like this. Obviously, I'm going to do some better art for it and sit down and try to draw a little bit more. But it could be cool. I think stylistically, sometimes I'll do this with like a top-down map. There's a really great free town generator. If you've never used it, it is just called Medieval Fantasy City Generator. Holy cow, it is phenomenal. I love this thing. I'll put the link in the description because it's just super great. You can get a lot of stuff done with it, and it makes just some nice looking maps really quick. You can play with it and just generate a ton of maps until you find one you really like. You download that, and then usually I take them into Photoshop and I put the numbers on them, and I make the legend, make the key, and write down like what building is what. How important is that map? Honestly, who knows, right? Kind of not that important. It's good for letting the players mark where they're going to be and where those scenes are going to take place. So again, you don't get people trying to role play over top of each other. But if a combat breaks out in the village, how useful is that map going to be? Unless you really, make it to scale, it might not be the most useful thing. But it's fun to have. It does get the players into it. People like to see those nice maps. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about doing here with this side scroller style map. Is it if you draw some nice looking buildings here, you just find some like nice looking artwork of buildings, and then you just paste them side by side. It's like, oh, this is what the tavern looks like. Perfect. Boom. And you slap that right beside a something that looks like some big Roman style architecture that's going to be like the fort or something. It just kind of does a nice little job of painting the picture for the players, right? I'm not going to say that it brings immersion because I hate that, but it does bring immersion. That's really what it's about. Keeps things organized, it keeps play moving. It makes the players commit to stuff. And when they commit to stuff, you can keep the plot rolling onward. When you have to guess where everybody is, or you have people who are trying to teleport around and do way too much stuff that nobody could do in a single day, you're slowing down the downtime, and you're if you're trying to make this really big story where most of what's going to happen has nothing to do with this village, you're just slowing yourself down from getting out of said village. Which then kind of raises another question, though, right? So we're talking about the village that you go to in between the dungeon, right? Again, classic village of Hamlet, keep on the borderlands. When you're not fighting monsters, you go back to the village to spend your gold and recuperate. What if you're not dealing with a tiny little village and you have a big city? What if that big city is your whole game, right? You're trying to do maybe like some cyberpunk, right? So right now I'm involved in a project with a really awesome cyberpunk city that we've been fleshing out for a very long time. Super excited to be a part of that, and hopefully someday we'll be able to talk about it more in depth here. But what if this is like where you're at is just the dungeon, right? What if the city is the dungeon? I'm doing air quotes again, right? The adventure takes place in the city. How should that map look, right? Should you make it square by square foot, block by block, know exactly where every building is? Um, that's a really tough to answer question. I would say that if you're trying to do something like that, where it's extremely important that you need to know exactly that it's 150 feet between the bakery and the weaponsmith or something like that, because you're going to do some kind of like building to building combat craziness, then yeah, you're going to have to probably make that kind of a map. But there are some other strategies that you can utilize. Again, if you take a look at that medieval fantasy city generator, right? This this gives you these buildings that are like little blocks, little squares, and maybe you have a rule where it's just like each round you can move, 3 blocks, meaning like 3 houses or something like that, and move around that way. That would be one strategy to handle that sort of travel through the city. Maybe you just keep it all theater of the mind, um, except for just sort of like a list of what buildings and shops and NPCs are in the city, and it's more based on the checks that you make, right? We talked about skills last time, and kind of like role playing off of your skills, and maybe you have to make that athletics roll to just out sprint some guards that are chasing you. Maybe you have to make that insight roll to navigate the twisting, turning alleys that you're trying to dart through. But things become a little bit more interesting than when you think of the city as the dungeon, or like the city is going to take place, is the main place where the adventure takes place, right? You have to then start to think of the city as like almost like an encounter or like an enemy, right? The city becomes a character, right? As rounds of combat advance, you want to include um, things like people swarming about. I'm the guys. I'm always thinking this, right? This happens in like a Jackie Chan movie, where Jackie Chan is like running through the alley, and then there's like 2 dudes carrying like a big pane of glass, and then the guys that Jackie's running away from like smashing the pane of glass, right? Um, that is something that is like part of the city itself. You want to sell the players on this idea that almost like the city is growing around them, and these buildings could like come up out of anywhere, right? Especially if they're not from that city. That could be like a really cool thing, is like you just find so you're looking for a place to hide, and then it's like as you're thinking about it, you just realize there's this like bell tower ahead of you. So it's almost like the bell tower just like appeared, but you just never noticed it before, or something like that. It makes it feel kind of like alive, but you can kind of just wing it. um Thinking about some other stuff too. It could go with the city campaign. I don't know if I've ever run a really like heavily urban focused game like that. If you think about Blades in the Dark, I always end up talking about Blades in the Dark sometimes here. Blades in the Dark takes entirely place. It takes place entirely in the city of Doskvol, which is this big crazy steampunk city with a lot of stuff happening, and it's always nighttime, and you just navigate the streets, and you know the whole big thing of that game is the collaborative storytelling again, though, and the players can talk to you about um, some of the things that they want to happen. They get the chance to make these like flashback rolls, which is really interesting, right? So maybe if the players, again, using that idea of fleeing, the players are like fleeing the scene. A player could make a flashback roll and then say, earlier I noticed a church that I thought would be a really good place to lay low. And they can make that roll, and if they do a good job on it, then bang, like that becomes a place where everybody can like go and sneak away and hide for a little bit. Or what else? Other stuff in the city, or like everybody's on the run, and then somebody makes a flashback roll, and you drop it on everybody that you actually earlier you hid the getaway vehicle here. Or classic one. This was the one. Whenever I played Blades in the Dark for the first time, whenever I ran it the first time, the players were breaking into this warehouse. So the game like opened up with this flashback of the player like having these fake documents that they had made to get into the warehouse, and they were pretending to be like the like the supervisor, and they were coming in to do like inventory and stuff, and that was how they got in. So Blades in the Dark, with those mechanics like that, it's a lot easier to fill the city because you don't have to do it entirely as the game master. The players can take some of that load off of your shoulders. And I would say if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, you should probably do the same thing and invite some of those mechanics and concepts into the game so that the players can like generate stuff. City's a big place. There's a ton of stuff there. And you want to see, if you want it to feel like it's like crawling with things, you got to get the brain power of your players' imaginations running wild with it too. But yeah, this is kind of my big thought for the evening, was just this sort of a map that you could do really fast on the fly and lay out some buildings. You could write stuff in about it. A fun exercise that you could do would be like have your players all just come up with a building, like hand them note cards, like index cards, right? And have them do like a doodle of a building and then write who owns it, who's in there, what's going on, and just get a bunch of those, shuffle them all up, and then like deal out those cards, and then bang, that's your town, right? So you have somebody make like, maybe everybody makes an inn, a church, a shop, a mayor's office, maybe something like a farmhouse, the slums, the barracks, the sheriff's, the deputy's office, right? All these different buildings like that, and you can just like mix them all together and then like throw them out, and then bang, you just randomly generated this town, but it's with everybody's ideas. That's actually a cool thing. I just sort of came up with that right now, but I would like to try that sometime. It would be a really fun, just a fun game on its own, just a nice collaborative storytelling, having everybody come up with their own little adventure or their own little shop like that, the NPC that runs it. You could go one step further, right? If you really like that idea of collaboration, then if it is a specific person's building, rather than you run that part as the DM, let the player run that as the DM. It's another big thing that we're seeing a lot in RPGs. Maybe not so much in D&D, but there's a lot of stuff out there where the game is trying to break away from having just one dungeon master, one game master, in collaborative storytelling. Let players DM their building that they make, right? Talk about what's going on there. You still have to maybe have one central DM because, they've probably spent several hours like brainstorming some really cool adventure for you guys to go on long term, and they don't expect you to just hang out all day in the tavern, but that is something that happens. Um, so just some stuff to think about. Interesting, some ways that you can improve the flow of your game with this kind of map. Um, I hope you guys find this helpful. I encourage people to use it. If you've never done like a downtime map like this, I can attest that it does kind of smooth gameplay along, gets people to commit to their turn. You can um, buckle down on the narration, tell everybody what's going on, and just keep that storyline moving. So that way you're not just dragging it out at the tavern or at any one place, or letting one person take the spotlight the whole time, right? Keep that spotlight moving around from player to player, not just in the dungeons, but in downtime too. Otherwise, you will find that there will be one player who will do all the talking. And if everybody's cool with that, that's fine. But I'm sure everybody wants their chance to uh, do some talking, do some character interactions, and not just leave it up to the rogue or the bard or that guy that's got all the big diplomacy skill checks and stuff like that. But that's what I've got for y'all. Let me know how it goes. I'm gonna try to get some videos up real soon here. No, I've been saying that, but I really do mean it. And we'll talk to everybody soon, guys. Got some Lands Below action this weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. And maybe here real soon we'll do I want to do like an adventure summary of all the different games that I'm running and that you're all involved in. I think that would be pretty fun because Lands Below players might not know all the exploits of the Lands Above players and vice versa. And I'm sure you guys might be interested in hearing about what my Friday night group is playing in. It's pretty wild stuff. So if you have it, like and subscribe, please, and keep decomposing, everybody. Talk to y'all soon.